So welcome, Kuauhtli, to the Australian Psychedelic Society Sydney's inaugural Cactus Day. We decided Cactus needed its own day. You have Bicycle Day, you have 920 Mushroom Day, and the cactus is a very underrepresented medicine in the sort of psychedelic pharmacopoeia. It doesn't get as much attention as it really deserves, I believe. So yeah, we sort of thought of some guests that would be good to have, and you were right up there, and we were hoping you would be here in the country, but as we just discussed earlier, the COVID things just changed everything for everybody. So as way of introduction, Kuauhtli's life journey is years of involvement in the movement for human rights and activities to preserve the indigenous ways of life, and this served as preparation for his current path. For the past 25 years, he's dedicated himself to conducting ceremonies using traditional dances, songs, and plants across Mother Earth. In these ceremonies, Kuauhtli conducts the Mexican ceremonies of, could you pronounce that?
Xochitl Incuica.
Okay, so that's flower and song. And Native American church teepee meetings, as well as Temazcal, which is sweat lodge, and Mexica danza, which I take as dance.
Yeah, traditional dancing.
Yeah. So Kuauhtli's visited 36 countries while actively promoting the legalization and medical research of peyote and other entheogens. Many of you may remember seeing Kuauhtli on the episode of Hamilton Morris's Pharmacopoeia, the episode Peyote, Divine Messenger. And you might also know his voice from Back to Nature track, featuring Kuauhtli and the Wixárika tribe of the Nightmares on Wax album. Yeah, so could you just tell us a little bit, begin by telling us a little bit about what led you to this work? What was your calling to this path, and who your mentors were? And yeah, a little background.
I was traveling in Mexico when I was a young man, and I wanted to visit the place where my grandfather was born, which is commonly referred to as Wirikuta. And this is the place in San Luis Potosí, the state of San Luis Potosí. And this is where the origins of the peyote cactus are, according to the mythology of the Wixárika tribe, the Wixárika people. And while I was there, I happened to have the good fortune of participating in a peyote ceremony. And I was transformed, I guess you could say. And the things that I thought were important were no longer important, and other things became important. So one of those things became important was, how could you say in a nutshell, I don't want to sound like too idealistic, but yeah, I had always been on trying to change the world, I guess you could say.
Idealistic, they might say.
Idealistic, yeah, kind of utopian, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But I think peyote changed me in a way that helped me to let the world change me in a positive direction. Whereas I was able to understand more the happenings that were occurring in the world, during that time, the 70s. It was a very turbulent time. And kind of put in focus some of the teachings that I had kind of been introduced to by some of the indigenous leaders who I had the good fortune of meeting when I was young. And the things that they spoke of became more clear, and I think I had like a practical application, not only in my own life, but also for modern society. So I kind of got on this quest of trying to be a bridge for indigenous thought and modern technology, I guess you could say.
No, that's what we need, is people to bridge the worlds. Yes, that's something I had read about peyote, is that it's like a rite of passage that solidifies the truth of the mythological stories that children in the tribe are brought up with. And then when they're a certain age, they take peyote and they realize that those stories are true. They are part of the reality of the cosmos. And so it sounds a similar experience.
It was definitely a turning point in my life. I could say that it gave me a totally different perspective on how to not only change myself, but also to bring more change in the world. So I think this was important that, yes, I mean, we receive a lot of, I guess you could say, history, oral tradition, but I think a lot of it is things that you learn just through your own personal observation after you begin to understand how the peyote is altering your DNA, how it's altering your syntax, how it's altering your basic perception of reality. It's giving you a whole new different way to interact with your environment.
Yeah, a more harmonious way, you would say?
Definitely, yeah, definitely more harmonious. Yeah, I guess you could say more peaceful, more artistic, more natural. You really discover a profound love for nature. I think this could possibly be one of the strongest things that change, and people that grew up in modern society that are kind of, even though, like, I could say I grew up in nature, but at the same time, I could say I grew up in a city because I was kind of on the outskirts. So even though I had part of my childhood was in nature, I also was in a classroom and, churches and all of this kind of stuff, which.
Yeah, that changing perception of nature is certainly one of the most important issues facing our society at the moment. If psychedelics can increase environmental awareness, then that absolutely could be the key. Being idealistic again.
Yeah.
So tell us a little about the Native American Church and how you got involved with them.
Okay, so I was in a group that represented the Native people of the entire hemisphere in a journey to the United Nations to present our case to the Economic Council it's like the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations in Geneva. And in this group were leaders from many, many nations, Native nations, all the way from Alaska all the way down to Argentina, to Chile, And this group was organized in an NGO, a non-government organization, because there is not a representative of the Native nations of this hemisphere in the United Nations.
Oh, okay.
There are no, of all the nations, and there's thousands of nations that exist presently in this hemisphere, and none of them has an official seat in the United Nations. So through the colonist, European governments, it's not adequate to present the legal and to try to find recourse in the laws that have been established by the United Nations. So we had so people set up a non-governmental organization, an NGO, and then organized all of the Native leaders to come together, and then in this way we could present are cases. For example, in the United States, there's 376 treaties that were signed by the presidents, ratified by the US Congress, that were made, 376 treaties that were made with Native nations in this, what you call the United States, that have all been violated. Every one of those treaties has been violated. And these were international accords drawn up and ratified by the leaders of the United States with the leaders of the Native nations, which inhabit what you call now the United States. And systematically, each one of these treaties was violated, was broken. Some of them dealt with, most of them dealt with boundaries. That is, for example, the 13 colonies established with the Native nations that they were coming into contact with. And they drew up a treaty, and as soon as they had an army strong enough to invade and kill the Native people, they just kept going and going till they made it all the way to the Pacific coast. So anyway, this, for example, is what the United States was being charged with by this group which I was representing. Well, luckily, in this group of Native leaders were many of the Native people who were practicing what they call the Native American church ceremonies. And the Native American church ceremonies was an ingenious legal structure that was created by one of the last warrior chiefs of the Comanche people. The Comanches were the people who lived in Texas, and some of them still do, but they were the ones who kind of dominated Texas as in the time when the United States was taking over the land militarily. And the Comanches were some of the last people to relinquish their sovereignty, to lay down their arms, and then finally agree to live on these reservations. And the Comanches were instrumental through one of their leaders named Quanah Parker, who negotiated to have like a lot of cattle. Since all the buffalo were practically exterminated, he goes, well, how do you expect us to live? So he kind of did a deal to get all these cattle. And these cattle were kind of wild, and then one of these cattle, one of these bulls gored him with the horn, and he was kind of on his dying bed. He was on his deathbed. He was going to die. And some people took him down into Texas, and they cured him with some peyote. Doctors cured him. So he became so grateful to the peyote that he kind of dedicated his life to this cactus. And part of what he did was establish the Native American Church under the auspices of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, which is freedom of religion.
Yes, yes. And that's something we don't have in Australia, so, you know, it's hard to sort of see a similar thing happening here. But I think it's a very unique part of the American Constitution, is that freedom of religion that allows entheogenic religions to establish themselves.
Yes, this was also used subsequently by other organized churches in different countries. But you could say that Quanah Parker, the Comanche chief, was the first one to do this in modern times.
So yeah,
establish a church under the auspices of the legalities of the country in which he was living. And this created something that Native nations who were now suffering in these reservations, because the first thing that they established in the reservations were liquor stores, and they were selling alcohol to the Native people and destroying their culture through the use of alcohol. And personally, I could say the same thing was happening to me. As when I was growing up, you know, a lot of youth in the United States think it's a symbol of manhood or something to be able to drink alcohol, you know, and to get, if you get drunk and go do everything else that goes along with alcoholism. You know, and the effects are disastrous on a whole population. So peyote was effective in curing alcoholism on a massive scale in the native reservations, restoring not only the health, but the dignity and the culture of native people. This is what peyote was doing for the native people, and is still doing this. So there's different chapters of the Native American Church in almost every reservation. And then after the United States saw that that some of the other sectors of the population were becoming interested in the native culture through different literature, like let's say Carlos Castaneda, or books from the UCLA anthropology department called the Peyote Cult, and different books were coming out, movies were coming out. Jim Morrison said he ate peyote, Santana said he ate peyote, so it was, people were hearing about this peyote, this cactus. And the United States made it illegal for anyone other than the native people to eat peyote. Why? Because there was part of their attempt to stop this cactus from creating more awareness in the general population. So when I finally discovered this Native American church, and I was listening to some of the leaders, they go, no, peyote's for everyone. And some native people said, no, you can only give it to native people. The law says you can only give it to native. You can't. It's against the law to give it to white people, Yeah. And since I was of the mind that this was good for everyone, I decided to start sharing the Native American ceremonies in other countries. And I was able to travel to Australia, to New Zealand, and to some of the Indonesian countries kind of in your neighborhood. Perth, Melbourne, Byron, Sydney, and other places in Australia, and shared the Native American church ceremonies.
Fantastic. And
the results have been phenomenal,
Yeah.
People have benefited from physical ailments. They benefited by healing their physical ailments, I should say. I have a hard time speaking English, I must admit.
Oh, no, you're fine, yeah.
So the peyote helped them resolve some addictions on pharmaceuticals, for example. Most doctors receive kickbacks for prescribing pharmaceuticals as remedies for a lot of ills that people are suffering. And these pharmaceuticals are not good for the human organism. And the peyote, which has I think over 50 alkaloids, I'm not a chemist, so I haven't really been able to analyze it in a laboratory. But some of my friends are chemists, and they tell me that peyote has 52 alkaloids. And they work on the endocrine system, helping the body to regulate through the glands, the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, the thyroid, the thymus, the adrenals, the gonads, like this, helps the body produce the proper amount of hormones. Okay. And as you know, the endocrine system and the hormones are directly related to the chakras in the energetic field. And I always talk about this because what I've seen is people that are depressed are able to consume peyote, and they're able to their body is able to produce the proper amount of hormones, which relieves their depression. People that are suffering from anxiety are able to regulate the amount of, cortisol, adrenaline, these kind of things, and then it calms them.
Mm.
And they are able to get off of the prescribed drugs, the pharmaceuticals, forever. It actually cures their situation by reactivating their energetic field, which then kicks in their hormone production, which then has the effect of healing this that has been caused by some traumatic experience.
Which can often be stored in the body as well. So it's a very
Because a lot of the ills, you know, this Jef come from trauma.
And yeah, everything's interconnected. So you know, within the body, mind, and spirit. Yeah. So it's great that you're able to bring the peyote over here. Because while we're very blessed in Australia to be able to grow just about any entheogenic plants, there's a lot of Wachuma, San Pedro, but you know, as you know, the peyote takes a long time to grow. So I'm sure you have some strong feelings about conservation efforts and overharvesting.
No, I don't really believe there's an issue with overharvesting or actual conservation of the actual plant, because peyote is a remarkable plant in this, that, for example, if I cut the top off of a peyote button, which has a taproot into the desert soil, which is very alkaline, this part of the peyote will survive for months without water and without contact with the soil. And this is quite a phenomenon, because most plants, if you sever them from their root, will perish within a few days.
Yeah.
You know, some tubulars will last longer, but peyote, being a cactus, most cactus can survive for a long time without contact with the earth.
Yeah, the San Pedro do as well. You know, you can leave.
Yes, this is correct. So,
months and months.
So what people can do is they can cut the top off of these peyotes, transport them to other countries, to other states, to other parts, and then reintroduce them either in a pod or to the soil if the temperature is adequate. And they're just growing all over the place. Also, one phenomenal thing about the peyote is when you cut it, let's say you cut one button off of a root, that root is going to produce multiple buttons. Where it only had one, now it has 2, 3, 4, and depending on the size of the root, could have as many as 12 buttons off of where there was once one button.
Yeah.
So basically, the more peyote you eat, the more it grows.
Yeah.
Now there is an issue, and I want to address this, Jef, because I understand what you're pointing at. And this is the destruction of the land where peyote has its natural habitat. And this we need to focus on. Instead of confusing the issue with overharvesting or the need to reduce the amount of peyote that's being consumed, for example, it could smack of this, but this is not really the case. What we need to do is stop the cattle ranchers, stop the oil production, stop the Walmarts, stop the, all of these guys.
Which is
agribusiness.
Full-scale land clearing. So they're just, the backhoe just digging up, square kilometers of peyote, I imagine.
I've seen what they do. They have these huge chains that the links are as big as a human person. Imagine this link of a chain that's as big as a human. This tall, tall as us, huge link. And they put these links together like this. And then they have two huge machines that the wheels are about as big as a house. And they have these two machines and they're just dragging these chains like this across the desert just to clear the land. This is a modern way of clearing land. When I was still a kid, they still used to hire people to go and cut and burn and things like this. They don't do this anymore. They hire these huge machinery and they just destroy the whole ecosystem, and all the peyotes get destroyed. You know, so what could be helpful is a campaign to, first of all, we need to like shift or completely change the attitude of society towards peyote, wachuma, and all the other ethogens, mushrooms, and all of this. And this is the first thing we need to do, so that then we can begin a proper conservation effort of extracting the peyote that's being destroyed and designating areas to replant and then conserve the existing peyote. And the same thing could be said of the peyote in Mexico, whereas the other area where peyote naturally grows, in Mexico and Texas. So this needs to be done in both countries. First of all, create the appreciation for the plant, for all the wonderful and miraculous curing abilities that it has, and then do a proper conservation campaign to protect and, you know, reestablish the peyote in its natural habitat.
That sounds like a good approach, rather than sort of going up face to face with the bulldozer and, you know, trying to stop it from happening. Just move it. So could you discuss some of the aspects, the traditional aspects that inform the peyote teepee ceremony?
The peyote ceremonies, and I think we should point out that, like the Comanches, who were the last people to relinquish their sovereignty to the United States, and, well, like the Hopis and other people that are related to the people in Mexico, or the Wirarica people, which a lot of people call Huichol.
Ah, yes. That's the art that everyone's familiar with, the little, very colorful, bright fluorescent beads. Yeah, I think most people recognize Huichol from their art.
Yes. I actually met the woman who began the yarn art paintings, which have now become like a standard for understanding the mythology of the Huicholes through their art. And this woman, whose name was Ushama, also had a Spanish name, Guadalupe de los Rios. I met her when she was in her 90s, and I was still quite a young man. And her husband were the first ones to have this vision of creating this artwork with the colored art on the flat wood. They put beeswax, and then they put their visions using the colored yarn. Well, these people, and who knows what genius they had, took themselves out of the path of colonialism, of Christianity, of the Mexican government, and they recluse far in the mountains of Mexico, in the Sierras, where almost passage by horse was impossible. And they established their communities there using their native agriculture techniques: corn, beans, tomatoes, chilies, cotton, all the things that they needed, which were native to their culture, to survive. And peyote was also a fundamental part of their culture. So this ceremonies are based upon the relationship of humans with nature. And at the core of this understanding is the four basic elements: So in the ceremony, they have the fire in the center of the altar. And at various times in the night, they pray to the wind of the four winds, the direction. Then they make offerings to the earth. For example, they make a hole in the middle of the ceremony in the earth and begin to make offerings to the earth. And at some point of the ceremony, they bring in, water, either in, like a bucket or a gourd, and they honor the water for its life-giving properties. And these basic elements of a ceremonial structure were then transferred to the Native American church, because these had been held for thousands and thousands of years. And when you ask the Native people how long they've been here, it far surpasses what most historians or anthropologists, the dates that they talk about. I mean, we talk about like thousands and thousands of years. And so this knowledge has been guarded like as a treasure, as like the most sacred. This information on how humans, through the consumption of peyote and mushrooms and all the other plants, can perceive the energy of the earth and understand how humans are directly connected to this energetic field. And then through the ceremonies, this is what people can perceive. First, they see the perception of the elements, and then they see how the elements are coursing through the individual human beings that are in the circle. So what happens is that through the opening of the chakra system and through the opening of a newly acquired vision. I mean, I used to wear glasses when I was in high school because I was a very studious student, and I kind of ruined my eyes from straining so much reading. But once I discovered peyote and understood how it could help you correct your vision, I threw my glasses away, and I haven't worn glasses for like 50 years.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I go for checkups, eye checkups, and they go, "You don't need glasses." Okay, great. Not only does it increase your vision of what you would call the 3D world, or whatever, however you want to describe, but it also enhances your extrasensory perception. So through the ceremonies, when we give thanks for the food in the morning, we are reestablishing the fundamental correlation of human beings with nature. And this has a profound effect on the psyche of each individual that participates in these ceremonies. It has a profound effect on their individual lives. It has a profound effect on the community. So this is how the Native American church ceremonies help to reestablish the how could you say, the dignity and the self-worth of the Native communities.
And the sovereignty, yeah. I mean, of all sort of entheogenic compounds, cactus seems to have a deep connection to community. Reading Mike Jake's book about large groups of people dancing and celebrating together on peyote and Mochuma. So more so than we see with other plants, where people tend to like to take a solo journey or, a small ayahuasca ceremony. So with the teepee, it runs all night from sundown to sun up. So it sounds kind of like you enter and you go through your experience, and then you come out into the daylight reborn with new sight. And direct experience of how the human being fits into the network of nature, rather than just a mental understanding of it.
Well, the reason I really like peyote too is because you can really dance up a storm. Literally dance up a storm.
Yeah. So stimulating. Yeah.
After the first ceremony that we did in Byron, one of the hugest storms I ever witnessed. And the people that were there, maybe some of the people that are listening to your program, they will recall this storm. It was quite a strong storm. And some people told me they had never seen a storm quite that strong.
Yeah, because I mean they're pretty regular.
I mean, the water was coming in. The water was coming in sideways.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, there was a beautiful rainbow afterwards. And once they were able to clear the broken branches off of the roads, and people were able to wring out all their mattresses and things, it was quite a cleansing for the area. Because there has been some conflict between some of the indigenous people of Australia and some of the new age practitioners of rituals that they've acquired through contact with other parts of the world.
Yeah.
And I think some of the native people were feeling a little distraught about some of the Australian people, doing these kind of ceremonies. So it needed something strong to shift this feeling of separation, and to remind everyone that regardless of where we're from or our personal history, the earth is in a moment where it requires all human beings to coalesce in an effort to save humanity from designs that are aimed at transforming the world into a technological
machine.
I would call it a nightmare, because I'd actually had nightmares about this.
and it's very reminiscent of the sort of sci-fi movies we watched in the 80s, of Blade Runner, and we literally seeing this happening, this dystopian future unfolding before our eyes.
I had a nightmare, and it was very similar to what's happening with 5G. It was actual nightmare that I had. I mean, I'll share it. It's a dream. It's in a dream, but it was a dream where they had these towers, and the towers could detect through your biological response, it could detect if you had some kind of adverse feelings or thoughts to what was going on.
Yeah.
And it had these tentacles that came in and kind of trapped me and put me into a room that had like a force field. It was like a jail, but you couldn't get out. You were like trapped. Luckily, somehow, the thing about peyote and these other plants is that it does alter your DNA, and it does alter your chromosomes, and it does alter the way your body functions and thinks. And I think humanity, a lot of people are giving a lot of credit to this modern technology. But, within these 36 countries that I've visited, I visited to some of the marvels of the ancient civilizations, including the pyramids in Mexico, the pyramids in Guatemala, what you call pyramids, the pyramids in Egypt, the stone structures in, South America, in Peru, in Ecuador, and, in England and Greece, and, Turkey and Indonesia, and the reason I'm mentioning all of these is because when you're there, most people contemplate the past at some point. But what they contemplate is their own past, you know. Oh, I remember I did this, I remember I did that. When you eat these plants like peyote, in these sites, it's like you reach a state of timelessness in your understanding of the universe, and this allows you to transport yourself to understand, at least. I'm not going to say you could learn how to build a pyramid, but who knows? Maybe you could.
A lot of people, a lot of friends.
Yeah. I mean, think about Costa Rica. They have these spears in the middle of the jungle made out of volcanic rock that are perfect in their dimensions. They're all various sizes and arranged in geometric formations that were left by a previous civilization. And the Spanish were famous for destroying these because they were looking for gold. They thought gold was inside of these. I mean, the mentality, you know. And it's the same thing with modern people. They don't realize the treasure that's there.
It's just
and they fabricate lies. Yeah, they fabricate lies. Oh, the Aztecs used to sacrifice human beings on their pyramids. They built this big pyramid so they could take a human being, put them up there and cut their heart out and offer it to the sun god or something like this. And people believe this because they're retold lies over and over and over. And when you eat peyote, when you drink ayahuasca, when you eat wachuma and eat mushrooms, you realize how ridiculous and how wrong these stories are, because they turn people against entire societies that are holding information for.
And as we know, you know, history is written by the victors, and so in any country where there's been colonization, the dominant narrative is that of the colonizer.
Blatant lies, you know, blatant fabricated lies. You know, like when you talk about our people, they drew like little, it's almost like stick figures of some person with a feather cutting another person's heart. And then they present this little cartoon figures that this proves, you know? And it's the same cartoon figure that they put in every book that talks about human sacrifice by Aztecs. I mean,
So
you have to eat peyote to realize that this is just a bunch of fabricated stories. You know?
I'm imagining it could be someone, say, applying Cambo to someone else, but to the colonizer's mind, it's like a stabbing, you know?
So, the Native American church ceremonies, the way I conduct them, is a fusion, Jef. And there's traditional Native American church ceremonies that I feel have a protocol which incorporates too much of the religion, the Christianity, the United States Army, and the education system of the United States in the ceremonies. And I've had to divert from this when sharing this with other cultures around the planet. So what I have incorporated is some of the other ceremonies, for example, from the Wiraricas, from the Huichol, where they pretty much use dancing every ceremony. And then some of the other cultures where we use the flowers and the singing to bless each individual that's in the ceremony. And this also has a profound effect on their state of well-being. When you're blessing somebody by sprinkling water and you have guitar music and angelic women singing and you're blessing them with flowers, I mean, it's like a spiritual car wash.
Oh, it reminds me of ayahuasca ceremonies, you know, with Agua de Florida and, you know, the guitar song, the ayahuasca medicine songs, and, you know, and there's groups of people singing, and yeah. So the flower and song and the dances all tied into the TB ceremony.
Exactly. So this is the difference that I want to make a kind of a disclaimer that traditional Native American church ceremonies, as they are practiced in the reservations, are very beautiful in their own way. But I found that trying to transpose this format in Arab countries or in Asian countries or in India or with Europeans, or in Israel, or in other places, Arab countries, it doesn't work as well. So the peyote helped me to become more creative.
Yeah.
Peyote is very good for your creativity. And it stimulates your intuition to have like awareness when people are not feeling good about something. You see, they say now it takes an algorithm to monitor all the likes on Facebook and Instagram to determine for you what you feel good about. And I can attest, I can say for my own self, when I eat peyote, I can tell what makes people feel good and what doesn't make them feel good. I don't need an algorithm to determine this.
Yeah, I guess that's, the intuitive side that sort of our modern society ignores so much, that comes through there. You mentioned about the Christian elements of the Native American church. From what I've read, that was often used as a way of protecting the peyote ceremony from the Spanish colonizers by, using the saints and sort of disguising it, disguising the peyote ceremony with Christian iconography. It sort of protected them a little bit.
Well, this is also true, you could say, in that it was a scheme that the government was requiring them to be a bona fide religion. And of course, in the United States, at that time, was Christian dominated.
Still is.
Yeah, all the slave owners were basically Christians. And this substantiated their slavery, because in the Bible it talks about slavery. So the worst slave owners were the hardest ones that thumped their Bible the hardest. God said slavery was good. God said white people should take over the world. This kind of Christian. So in order to coalesce with this whole Christianity thought, they go, well, what if we put the Bible here on the altar where the peyote button is? So then what could they say? It was like their trump card. They were, okay, look, we got the Bible in here. It's a church. It was a scheme, but there are also many people who had already been Christianized. So some people actually do believe in this religion, and so it's at some point it's hard to find the exact. It was a scheme, but then people do believe it. Some people do believe it. So just like they put the American flag in the Native American church. You know this?
Yeah, no, I didn't know that. No.
Yeah. Native American. Native American church. So you have the United States flag, you have the Bible, and you have natives praying. This is the way some people interpret this.
Okay.
And I mean, who's to argue with them? I don't argue with them. I just found a way to share this in a different way. Like I said, the peyote made me very creative. So I put flowers in the teepee instead of the American flag. And instead of the Bible, we just put a peyote button.
Perfect substitution. Much infinitely more powerful too. So I'd like to discuss a little bit about the importance of ritual. you know, as psychedelics become sort of more, you know, popular, there's a renaissance happening. You know, people are drawn to them once again, and you know, often attempted to go out and just do it with a small group of friends or by themselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the importance of ritual definitely has a lot of power.
Well, it's the transference of the ceremonies into your daily habits. For example, every morning, without fail, I go to the sink. I have filtered water, so I can do this. And I take a beautiful crystal glass. I fill it completely full of water. And I give thanks for this sacred element of life. Every morning, this is what I do. And I was taught this. This is not something that I came up with. And I drink a glass of water. I take a few breaths. And I give thanks. I express my gratitude for life, for everything that we enjoy, for my children, for my grandchildren, for the future generations, for my ancestors, for everything. I kind of put myself in this connectedness. Now, this is all we're doing in the ceremonies on a group scale. And so like this, when we eat food, just like in the ceremonies, we usually say a little prayer of gratitude. And sometimes we take a little bit of the food that we're eating and we put it on a little plate and we go put it outside, you know? Yeah, same thing we do in the ceremonies. So what I'm saying is that you, your friends, and anyone that understands the fundamental basics of ritual and ceremonies, the way indigenous people understand it, have the complete ability and the complete responsibility to organize this type of activity when partaking of sacred plants. And you don't need a shaman, you don't need a priest, you don't need a curandero, you don't need a taita to intervene between you and the spirit. Well, this is another thing that Peyote taught me, and this is what I'm sharing with you. Anyone that eats peyote can have a direct connection with the fire, a direct connection with the earth, a direct connection with the element of water and the winds. They don't need somebody there to intercede for them, to be an intermediary. Now, having said that, there is a lineage and a tradition of people who have done ceremonies, and they become more elaborate, more complex, more integral. And these are what can be shared and learned by participating with people that have this information, this knowledge, certain songs, certain prayers, certain words that have been passed down through generations, certain understandings, the origins of things. All of this is also shared in the ceremonies, which creates a whole nother vibration and a whole nother ambiance. Is this the correct word?
Yeah.
So it elevates the people's level of ability to receive information. Peyote increases your ability to receive information. At the same time, it's increasing your capacity for love and compassion. And it increases your ability to store physical strength, physical energy. And so in this way, it's a holistic benefit for humankind, because peyote in our language means what makes your heart illuminated.
Ah. Yes, I've read about, you know, the Weechel people, they're going out looking for peyote, and the first one they find they eat, and then the rest of them will start to shine light as little beacons, and so they just got to eat that one, and then they can just see the light radiating from the rest of them. It's like beautiful story. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what illuminates your heart. Yolo means heart. Peyote means illuminated, like the light of a fire or something.
Oh.
So like this, I mean, the ceremonies they're amazing experiences, and I know most people, once they are in a peyote ceremony that's, you know, has the proper elements, they say it's one of the most powerful experiences of their life, and they never forget. This is what happened to me, and it happens to most everyone that participates. In fact, I tell the story of the congressman who was trying to criminalize peyote and the legislation, and once he finally agreed to come to a peyote ceremony, he was the one who was instrumental in legalizing peyote for Native people.
We need more of that. We need a lot more of that. Yeah.
Put peyote in the water supply of the White House or something.
Yeah. Well, you know, they talked about it in the 60s, and with LSD anyway. So, what I was also going to mention is the temazcal, the sweat lodge. Is that used in conjunction with peyote, or as a thing on its own?
The Native people have a whole regimen for good health. And you could probably, if you ever seen this circle with the cross, you know, the 4 colors and things like this, this is kind of the understanding of basic human health. So on one hand, you have like diet, proper food, agriculture. Culture comes from the food that you eat.
From the land.
The things that you grow. Yeah. So this is one cornerstone of, or 1/4 of the section of good health. So like Native people, they had, for example, the Mexica people, the people that were part of the civilization that my ancestors came from. For example, they developed spirulina, chia seeds, amaranth, corn, beans, like hundreds of kinds of corns, hundreds of kinds of beans, hundreds of tomatoes, hundreds of squashes, hundreds of potatoes, 5 colors of cotton, chocolate, vanilla, you know, different kinds of nuts, you know, peanuts, all these different kinds of foods that they had. So they had a cornucopia of food. You know, I just barely touched the tip. You know, all chilies come from Mexico. A lot of people thought there was chilies in India and China. Now there is, you know, in Thailand and all these places. But all chili, the word chili is a Mexican word. And they had hundreds of kinds of chili. You know, chili is the best food for your circulation. It opens up all your capillaries and gives all your cells a charge of vitamin C. You know, this. So what I'm saying is that food is one aspect of good health that the Mexica culture developed, and then the Mexica culture was all the way up into Canada and all the way down to the tip of to the beginnings of South America.
Wow, it's a large area.
Yeah. So all of these foods, you know, avocados. I mean, the list just goes on and on. You know, I could be here a long time naming all the vegetables and fruits that. Okay, so then let's get to the next point. Medicines and ceremonies. So they had mushrooms, they had peyote, they had morning glory seeds, they had different kinds of plants, flowers that they use, datura, and other plants that they use, and seeds that some of them have not been rediscovered yet, to do ceremonies. And this was another part of their health formula. Then another part was the physical activity. So this incorporated dancing mostly. The basis was dancing, which in our culture we say moving energy.
Ah, yeah, nice.
Moving energy, that's how you say dancing. Chikonkitzli means when you're dancing, you're moving energy. So they would do this, thousands of people doing the same rhythm, the same dance to Mother Earth, the dance to the sun, the dance to the corn, the dance to the eagle, the thousands and thousands of people simultaneously doing the same movements across large areas of land. Like, for example, every solstice or every equinox, they would begin certain dances at dawn, and then these dances would be conducted through the whole society, because these dances are mathematical and they're designed to harness the natural energy of the phenomena of which they are evoking. So like this, dance really is part of the basis of your good health. And then the sweat lodge was one aspect of this four-parted philosophy of good health. Because the sweat lodge incorporates the water, the fire, the earth, and the air in a design that is beneficial not only to your spirit, but to your mental, emotional, and physical well-being. So the sweat lodge, what we call sweat lodge in English, is a fundamental part of good health. And most houses, almost everyone had a sweat lodge in their home.
Wow.
This is what people don't understand. Sweat lodges were a basic part of your home environment.
Wow.
Everybody had a sweat lodge. Now, it's like people pay $5,000 to somebody in Arizona, and they come from Hollywood, and they make it out of plastic, and people have to go to the hospital afterwards because they suffocate, and they almost, a couple of people even passed away in these things because they don't really understand the basic elements of a sweat lodge are the same as the peyote ceremony. It's all about the elements. Just like eating good food, what's coursing through your veins and your blood are the elements of food, air, water, and fire. That's why you have a temperature, 98.6, or I don't know, what do you guys use in centigrade?
Yeah, 37.8.
Yeah, so this heat is the fire that's being generated in your organism through the division of through the energetic field and through the subatomic particles that are not really marbles, they're just light. Inside of you is light. Like they put these drawings of an atom, they put these little marbles, but they're not marbles, they're just energies. They're like squiggly worms of light. They're just photons and things, We're basically made of light. And this is the heat, this is the fire, and this is this is why you can communicate to the fire. You can speak to the fire. You can speak to the fire. And in the ceremonies, the people who are trained in this practice can speak to the fire and decipher information that can then be transferred to you.
Okay.
Things about health, things about, your fortune. So all of this is part of ceremonies too. And the fire can tell them what happened to you too. I've seen all of these things,
Yeah. So that four-structured complex you're talking about, is that what they call a medicine wheel?
It's like a medicine wheel, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And
Wow.
people, people who know this can tell you things about yourself. And So that's why if you go to the ceremony, you have to be prepared for some embarrassment too. You got to be careful because, you know, a lot of people have done things that they might not be so proud of. But in the ceremony, this is a good thing because these medicines are like truth serums.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in ayahuasca ceremonies and peyote ceremonies, people have to come prepared to face the truth, which is not always something that is honored in modern society, you know.
No. Well, as you're saying before with pharmaceuticals, you know, the idea is to suppress the uncomfortable thoughts and feelings that are coming up rather than go into them and explore them and work through them.
Yeah.
As we know, psychedelic means to manifest what's in the mind. So yeah, you never know what's going to come up. And hence the importance of having a safe and supportive environment to do that. And the teepee ceremony sounds very much like that.
Through the ceremonies, an individual and a group of people can hone their intention. And this is a very important part of harnessing the kinetic energy of thought to manifest and realize good things for yourself, for your family, for humanity, for the women. You know, and we always honor women in our ceremonies. It's one of the most important parts of the ceremony, the honoring of women. And this is done consciously and purposely to balance the disrespect and the incorrect way that women have been treated in modern times.
Good, yeah.
It's one of the worst aspects of modern society.
Because cactus is very, you know, what Jim is often referred to as the grandfather, and I assume peyote has a similar masculine association with it.
I mean, it depends what particular culture you are. Yeah, but usually it is a masculine spirit. There is an aspect of the ceremony where you are given the opportunity to pray with tobacco, and this is a very powerful spirit communicator, tobacco spirit. And when you pray with the tobacco, it's like a direct line to the great intention. And things that you pray for could have a better chance of becoming reality. I'll give you an example. My daughter is very intelligent. She's a native. You know, her mom is also Apache, and you know, I have native ancestry, so she's native. But in Texas, and this is the largest state of the union, but they really didn't create any reservations because their campaign was the complete eradication of native people. So there were no reservations created in Texas to offer to the native people. So most natives in Texas had to like blend into the society. But my daughter, being a very intelligent high school student, had a 4.2 average, and she wanted to go to the universities to continue her studies. But we didn't have any money. My wife and I don't have this kind of money, and we don't have access to these government grants. And college is extremely expensive here. So we prayed for her to get a scholarship. And she received a scholarship that pays for all her education.
Fantastic, yeah. Yeah, well, the power of intention, you know, is goes back way through even, you know, the ritual ceremonial magic of the European traditions back, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years, you know. It's fairly well universally understood.
Yeah, there's a mysterious element to reality. And see this the modern society with their computers and their algorithms and their artificial intelligence and all this that they've created, they really give it a lot of credit. Like they think this is something that is very powerful.
Well, it is. It is. It's just how you wield that power.
Yeah, they think it's
Potentially
very powerful,
by us.
but what they don't realize is that there's a mysterious element to the universe that is more powerful than the machines that the people have created.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they overlook it.
Yeah,
That's why I say they think it's powerful, but how powerful is it? All you have to do is stop the electricity, and then what happens?
Yeah, they call it artificial intelligence, and well, it might be awareness, but I don't think it's sort of intelligence as we know it from the human perspective and experience.
It's becoming very prevalent. This idea that this artificial intelligence is better for humanity than nature.
Yeah, well, I think they've got the directions mixed up, and we came from nature, and we're heading towards this AI, not the other way around. But yeah,
it's like ancient civilizations, like I was just mentioning. They developed all of this food without the help of computers.
Mm-hmm.
They modified the things naturally. They used their creativity and their imagination that was enhanced by this contact with the mysterious element.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I'll give you an example, corn. When scientists study corn, there's a mystery. They go, corn is something that is mysterious because they don't really know how it was developed, because corn needs to be planted by man or woman in order, like if a piece of corn just falls on the ground, it's not going to grow. You need to put it in the earth.
Yeah. Could the animals not be stamping it in?
Well, originally, the story goes that a person was able to transcend the physical boundaries, limits, and enter into another dimension. And in that dimension, he returned with corn. And this is our explanation for how corn came to Earth. But the scientists try to say that the Mexican people developed it by a grass, that they hybrid the grass and they turned the grass and they started, and this is their explanation to how corn came about.
Okay.
They ignored the mysterious aspect that someone could actually go into another dimension and bring back something into this physical reality.
I've read this a lot about ayahuasca. How did they know to combine the two plants out of all of the plants in the Amazon? Well, the tobacco plant told us how to do it, And Western mind can't comprehend that, It's like, it must have been trial and error.
Yeah, they had a laboratory with.
Yeah. Well, it's plant technology,
Yeah, plant technology is underrated. Natural, they're trying to substitute. There's an effort right now by, scientists, world leaders who have, an agenda on altering humanity to fit some scheme that they have, and I don't know. Some people are like they're coalescing, they're going along with it. They're saying, this is for the benefit of mankind. Myself, I mean, when I was a kid, there wasn't television. There were no cell phones. So I grew up in an era before technology took all these huge advances, you know. And, you know, I'm not saying I want to go back, because it's hard to take the whole world back to some natural state, which I think was better. I mean, you know, I think was better. If you want to take an evaluation, we had a lot better. There was less diseases. There was more community. People were eating better. Socially and politically, they were getting along a lot better. There weren't all these, you know, mass wars. At least not where we lived.
Yeah.
You know, we have a different history.
Yeah.
We have a different history.
Yeah,
you know?
much so. But I mean, it's a very common theme that, you know, particularly at the moment too, a lot of people expressing the desire to return to a simpler way of life off grid in the bush. But yet that doesn't mean, as you said, returning to a primitive way of life. You can take the solar technology with you, and wind technology, and renewable energy technology. So you have a merging of the two worlds in a much more harmonious way.
Yeah, I think the priority needs to be, this is my own thought, the planet. Like before, you know, I think there was like profit, you know, gold, money, whatever, you know, cyber change, whatever they call it now, you know, just trying to get more zeros on your bank account, you know. Okay, so everybody was racing to get all this, but I think people really need to reorganize their priorities and think about how humanity can better the existence of the planet. The planet is suffering from the onslaught of humanity. And we need to take this moment of global connectedness to come up with one unifying idea that could unify all the humans, and that is, let's take care of the planet. You know, this needs to be the number one slogan of all humanity, you know.
It feels like right now we're at a very significant crossroads with, you know, the lockdowns happening globally and various ideas of why it's happening, but we have been able to pause and look and see, do we want to go in this direction, increasing authoritarianism, or do we want to go in this direction and increasing harmony? So what we do with that is yet to be seen.
Well, I know peyote makes me more peaceful. Just my own self, since we're talking about cactus and peyote.
Yeah.
Because growing up in the United States, it's hard not to be caught up in the violence. You know, the video games the kids play nowadays, like 90% of it is just having a trigger and just shooting as many, you know, human figures on a screen as this is how you win. You know, this violent, and when I ate peyote, it completely took the violence out of my nature. You know? It completely took the violence out of my nature. Like, almost to the point where I hardly get angry anymore, Jef. Like, even anger, like, it's become very obsolete for me.
It's great.
Because it reduces your importance. Like, I'm so important that I'm going to get angry because, you know.
Yeah, that's a good way. I like that. That's a good perspective, yeah.
So hopefully, you know, they open up the borders again, because I hope to meet you over there in Sydney or wherever you're at, and meet with your group. You know, I want to say hello to all your listeners, because I know that at some point this conversation is going to have to, you know, come to some continuation, like, okay, we'll talk later or something like that.
We're all looking forward to being able to gather in person again, because it's very important. People need to meet each other and like-minded people, and, you know, as people develop an interest in the plants that may not have other people to talk to about it, or they have a profound experience and they have no one to share it with, and you know, these community gatherings are really important. And And also, you know, we have your teepee ceremonies are always beautiful parts of the land here.
Yeah. When I was there, some guy told me, he goes, you're not from Australia. I go, no. He goes, Australia is going to welcome you in a good way. It's going to give you everything you need, everything you want. It's all here in Australia, you know.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I met some of the native people, and they blessed me with their box and their feathers, and they came to the ceremonies, and
Wow.
I shared some of these stories in some other media, but I really feel at home in Australia, so I hope to make it back. I definitely want to go back.
A lot of ancient medicine tradition that's very little known about here. So hopefully over time we can learn a little bit more about the medicines that Indigenous Australians used to.
Yeah.
That's another conversation though.
That's a good yarn.
I look forward to sharing with you, Kuauhtli. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And hopefully May the 23rd can become Cactus Day and we can spread the word.
May 23rd, Worldwide Cactus Day.
Yeah, yeah. We'll make it happen.
All right.
All right. Blessings. Thank
Okay,
you,
blessings, Jef. Oh.
have a great night.
Okay. Ciao.
Yeah.